The desert stretched endlessly, a land of broken stone and silent winds. Long ago, it had been the center of a great war, but now it was nothing more than dust and ruins. The sky glowed with two pale suns, casting long shadows over crumbled statues and half-buried machines. The place was forgotten by most, avoided by many, but for one wandering human, it was a place of curiosity. His name was Kale, a simple explorer searching for lost history. He had traveled far from Earth, driven by the stories of ancient empires that once ruled this part of the galaxy. Every step he took echoed on the cracked ground, the silence heavy, as if the world itself held its breath. In the ruins, broken armor and shattered weapons lay scattered, covered in sand, whispering of battles no one remembered. Kale's eyes caught something unusual. Half buried in the dust, sticking out of the ground like a broken bone, was the hilt of a sword. It looked ordinary at first glance, rusted, forgotten, and without shine. But something about it drew him closer, as if the air itself wanted him to notice. He brushed the sand away, revealing the blade, long and heavy, though dulled by time. Strange markings ran along its length, glowing faintly, even under the suns. Kale frowned, his hand hovering above it, uncertain. The stories he had heard from locals came back to him. Rumors of a weapon once carried by the Emperor lost to time. A figure so feared that even his name was forbidden to speak. The Emperor had vanished centuries ago, but legends said his spirit still waited, bound to his blade. Kale laughed softly, shaking his head. It was just a story, he told himself, nothing more. Still, his hand reached out and gripped the hilt. The moment his skin touched the cold metal, the ground trembled. Dust rose into the air as the ruins around him seemed to awaken. The sky darkened slightly, though no clouds moved above. The blade pulsed with light, the runes along its length burning bright. Kale gasped, pulling it free. It was heavier than any sword he had ever held, yet it felt right in his hand. A strange warmth spread through him, as though the weapon itself recognized him. Then came the vision, sudden and powerful. Flashes of endless armies kneeling before a throne. Starships the size of cities crossing the skies. A shadowy figure in black armor lifting the same sword high, commanding galaxies with a single word. Kale stumbled back, nearly dropping the weapon. His heart pounded as the visions faded, leaving him breathless. What was that? He whispered, his voice shaking. The desert around him had grown silent again, too silent. It was as if the world was watching him, waiting, unseen by him. In the distance, alien eyes observed. Hidden among the ruins, a small group of locals had followed him. They saw the glow, the trembling earth, and the human standing with the blade in his hand. One of them whispered in fear, "The Emperor has returned." Another turned and ran, carrying the news back to their people. The prophecy was alive again. Kale, unaware of the storm he had unleashed, tightened his grip on the sword. It felt alive, humming softly as though whispering secrets he could not understand. He tried to place it back into the ground, but it would not release his hand. The weapon had chosen him, and there was no turning back. He looked around, suddenly uneasy. The air seemed heavier, charged with energy. He felt eyes on him, though he could not see anyone. The silence pressed closer, and the weight of destiny settled on his shoulders. Somewhere deep beneath the ruins, ancient machines stirred. Engines long dead flickered to life, sensing the return of their master. The world remembered, even if Kale did not. The human had lifted the forgotten blade, and the galaxy was about to awaken to a name lost in time. Kale stood frozen in the ruins, the sword heavy in his hand. The glowing runes along the blade pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and steady. He could feel it in his chest, in his bones, as if the weapon was alive. The air was filled with a low hum, almost like a voice whispering in a language he could not understand. For a moment, he wanted to throw it away, to escape from this strange weight that had fallen upon him. But no matter how hard he tried, the The sword would not leave his grip. It clung to him as if bound by fate, its light sinking into his skin. The desert wind howled, and for the first time, Cale felt afraid. Suddenly, the ruins around him began to shift. Sand slid off broken towers as hidden machines buried deep beneath the ground came to life. Gears turned, lights flickered, and old engines growled like beasts awakening from long sleep. The battlefield that had been silent for centuries now roared with energy. Cale staggered back, watching in shock as massive war machines rose from beneath the earth, their frames ancient and cracked, but their eyes glowing with red fire. Visions struck him again, sharper this time. He saw soldiers in dark armor marching in endless lines, banners of a forgotten empire waving above them. He saw fleets of starships burning through skies, obeying the command of one figure alone. A throne of black stone, high above the galaxy, with the Emperor standing tall, the same sword in his hand. Cale gasped, clutching his head as the memories that were not his own invaded his mind. His body trembled. His voice broke. This is not possible. Far away, in cities across the planet, alarms began to sound. Ancient sensors long thought dead had been reactivated, sending signals into the sky. Satellites hidden in orbit blinked with new light, broadcasting a single message into the stars. The Emperor's weapon has awakened. In shadowed halls across the galaxy, powerful beings felt the call. Alien councils, warlords, and secret orders froze in disbelief. The prophecy was clear. When a forgotten blade rises again, the Emperor shall return. Some trembled in fear. Others smiled with hunger for power. Whispers spread like fire. A human carries the sword. Cale, unaware of the storm reaching beyond the planet, tried to steady himself. The sword glowed brighter with every passing second, as though feeding from his heartbeat. His reflection in the blade's surface shimmered strangely. For a moment, he did not see himself, but a figure in black armor, tall and commanding, eyes burning like suns. He dropped the blade to the ground in terror, but it did not fall. It floated in the air for a heartbeat, then returned gently into his hand. The weapon had chosen, and choice could not be undone. The locals who had been hiding gasped as they witnessed the impossible. Some knelt in fear, bowing low to the human. Others fled, knowing what his awakening would mean for their people. The Emperor lost to time was not just legend anymore. He was alive through the human. From the sky, shadows moved. Ships belonging to ancient guardians, long tasked with preventing the Emperor's return, descended from orbit. They came not as protectors, but as executioners. Their mission was simple: destroy the one who dared to lift the blade. As their engines screamed overhead, Cale gripped the sword tighter. His heart pounded, fear mixing with a strange strength he could not explain. He whispered to himself, "I am not an emperor. I am no one." But the sword answered with light, casting his shadow across the ruins like that of a king. The machines around him rose higher, massive titans of war that bowed before his presence. Their voices echoed in mechanical unity. "Command us, Emperor." Cale shook his head, stepping back in disbelief. He was only a man, only an explorer, not the ruler of galaxies. Yet the universe itself seemed to disagree. Every starship that moved, every alien that watched, every machine that awakened, they all whispered the same truth. The human had lifted the forgotten blade, and the galaxy was no longer the same. The message carried by the awakened sword did not stay hidden for long. From the ruins of the desert world, signals pulsed through satellites, through broken networks, and into the deep void of space. Each flash of light traveled faster than Cale could imagine, reaching systems far beyond his sight. In the cold silence of the galaxy, whispers began to stir. On distant worlds, ancient councils gathered in dark chambers. Old leaders with silver eyes and scarred faces stared at the glowing reports before them. "The sword has chosen," one whispered, his voice trembling. Another slammed his clawed hand against the table. "It cannot be true. Not again." But they all felt it. the energy moving through the stars, the weight of prophecy breaking its chains. The prophecy was older than their nations. It said that the emperor lost to time would return when the blade rose once more. He would not return as the same man, but through another vessel. And now that vessel was a human, a species many considered weak and unworthy. Fear spread like poison, because if the emperor returned, then so would his empire, and the galaxy would kneel again. In secret, messengers carried the news from planet to planet. Warlords sharpened their blades, pirates raised their banners, priests prayed to forgotten gods. Some wanted to destroy the human before he could rise. Others wanted to follow him, to serve under the emperor's banner once again. The galaxy divided with only whispers, but soon those whispers would grow into war cries. Kale, meanwhile, walked through the ruins unaware of how far the news had spread. The sword glowed faintly in his hand as he explored deeper into the broken city. Everywhere he stepped, machines responded, lights flickered, and voices long dead echoed. "Welcome, Emperor," they whispered, though Kale shook his head in denial. "I am not your Emperor. I am no one," he said quietly. But the ruins did not listen, and neither did the stars. In hidden corners of the galaxy, alien scholars debated. One elder leaned close to a glowing map, his long fingers tracing the ancient prophecy. "The signs are exact," he said slowly. "The human is the vessel." Another snarled. "Then he must be killed before the stars bow again." But in the crowd, a young warrior spoke softly. Or maybe he must be followed, for perhaps destiny chose him for a reason. The chamber erupted in arguments, the galaxy itself caught between fear and hope. Kale felt the weight of unseen eyes, though he could not see them. At night, when the twin suns fell below the horizon, he sat near the fire and stared at the sword. The runes glowed softly, like stars captured within the metal. Sometimes he thought he heard voices calling his name, voices not his own, and sometimes, in the flames, he saw glimpses of fleets, of thrones, of soldiers kneeling. It made his heart heavy, for he knew he had never wanted power, but power was now forced upon him. Across the stars, bounty hunters loaded their ships. Secret assassins prepared their blades. A council of guardians whispered the order. The human must die before he could awaken fully. Yet in the shadows, others waited patiently, believing he would lead them to glory again. Every whisper, every step, every choice now pulled the galaxy toward chaos. Kale did not yet know that armies would march for him, or that empires would burn because of him. He only knew that his journey had just begun, and somewhere deep inside, the sword whispered with a voice like thunder, not of fear, but of destiny. The human had lifted the forgotten blade. The galaxy was listening, and the stars themselves seemed to bow. The galaxy whispered, and the whispers reached the ears of warlords who had long feared the prophecy. Among them was a ruthless alien commander named Verak. His name carried in terror across 7 systems. He believed no human could ever carry the power of the lost emperor. To him, Kale was nothing more than a weak pretender holding a relic too great for his hands. Verak gathered his soldiers in the shadow of a massive warship. Before them he raised his armored fist, his voice booming through the ranks. "A human has taken the emperor's blade," he growled. "A weak creature, unworthy of fear." The soldiers hissed and roared in agreement. Verak's eyes glowed with hate as he continued. "I will crush him myself and prove that the galaxy belongs to the strong." While Kale wandered the ruins, trying to understand the sword's whispers, shadows moved closer. The locals who had seen him lift the blade now watched from a distance, torn between awe and fear. Some bowed to him, whispering emperor, while others prayed that death would come before destiny reached them. Kale felt their stares, and the weight of their fear pressed on his chest. He did not want a throne, he only wanted to leave. But the sword hummed in his hand, pulling him toward a destiny he could not escape. At dawn, the sky broke open. Verak's warship descended, its engines shaking the ground, its shadow covering the ruins like storm. The earth trembled as the alien warlord stepped out, towering in heavy armor that shimmered with crimson light. Behind him, soldiers marched in perfect rhythm, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Kale froze, the sword heavy in his grip. The whispers of destiny grew louder, and he felt the eyes of the galaxy upon him. Veyrak stepped forward, his voice echoing like thunder. "So, you're the so-called emperor," he sneered, his fangs bared in a cruel smile. "You are nothing but a fragile human, a mistake of fate." His words cut deep, but Kale stood tall, even as fear coiled in his chest. "I never claimed to be emperor," Kale said, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "But the sword chose me, and I will not let it go." The crowd gasped as Veyrak laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Then fight me, human," he roared, raising his massive blade of black steel. The challenge could not be ignored. Kale's heart pounded as he lifted the glowing sword, its runes blazing brighter than ever before. The air cracked with energy as the two warriors faced each other, human and alien, destiny against defiance. The duel began. Veyrak's strength was monstrous, each strike of his blade shaking the ground. Kale stumbled, blocking desperately, the force of each blow nearly breaking his arms. The crowd shouted, some calling for Kale's death, others whispering for his victory. Veyrak mocked him with every strike. Is this the Emperor's return? A weak human gasping for breath. But the sword moved differently in Kale's hand. When he stopped fighting with fear and let the weapon guide him, the blade danced with impossible speed. It deflected Veyrak's monstrous blows with sparks of light, each movement carrying a power far beyond his own strength. Kale's eyes widened as he realized he was not fighting alone. The sword was fighting with him. Veyrak struck again, roaring in fury, but this time Kale met the attack with a steady hand. The forgotten blade flared, pushing the alien's weapon aside with a burst of energy that shook the ruins. Gasps filled the air as Veyrak stumbled, the unshakable warlord forced back. For the first time, fear flickered in his glowing eyes. Kale stood tall, the sword burning like a star in his hand. "I am no emperor," he said, his voice strong, "but I will not bow to you." The crowd fell silent, the weight of his words echoing across the ruins. The whispers grew louder, stronger, and for many watching, the truth was undeniable. The emperor had returned, not in the body of the past, but in the spirit of a human. Veyrak roared, charging again with blind rage. But the blade met him with a light too fierce to resist. The ground split with the clash, and when the dust cleared, Veyrak lay broken at Kale's feet, his weapon shattered. Silence followed, heavy and endless, before the whispers rose into cries. "The Emperor lives." Kale lowered the sword, his chest rising and falling with each breath. He did not want a title, did not want the throne, but he could not deny it anymore. The galaxy had seen the first proof of his destiny. The first challenge had been met, and Kale had won. The ruins were silent after the battle. Veyrak's body was carried away by his soldiers, their faces pale with fear. No one dared to challenge Kale now, not after they had seen the forgotten blade burn like a star in his hand. The locals who once whispered now bowed openly, pressing their heads into the dust, calling him emperor. Kale shook his head, his heart heavy. "I am not your emperor," he whispered, but the sword hummed, denying his words. That night, under the twin moons, the ground beneath the ruins shook. Deep underground, sealed chambers opened with a sound like thunder. From the heart of the ancient city, massive doors slid apart, revealing a hidden hangar filled with ships that had slept for centuries. Their black metal hulls shimmered as power returned to their cores. Engines rumbled, weapons glowed, and lights flickered back to life. The forgotten fleet was awakening. Kale watched in shock as the sky filled with shadows. One by one, enormous starships rose into the air, dust falling from their wings as if the earth itself had released them. The people around him fell to their knees, voices trembling. The fleet has returned. The Emperor commands again, they cried. Kale wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that he was no emperor, but the ships moved as if they knew only him. The sword in his hand pulsed brighter, and with each pulse, the ships seemed to bow. Inside the flagship, a throne room of black stone lit with golden light came alive. Holograms appeared, figures of generals from a forgotten age. They knelt in front of Kale's image, their voices united in one word. Emperor. Kale stumbled back, unable to breathe. He was only a man, an explorer who had come looking for ruins, yet the galaxy itself now saw him as a ruler. Across the stars, the awakening of the fleet sent shockwaves. On distant planets, rulers trembled as the sky filled with messages. The Emperor's fleet has risen, the transmissions declared. In hidden temples, priests lit fires and sang songs that had been forbidden for centuries. In pirate dens, captains raised their glasses and swore to follow the human who held the blade. And in the chambers of the High Council, voices shouted in panic. If the fleet has returned, then war is coming. Kale sat in the ruins, staring at the sword as the voices of the holograms echoed in his mind. You are the one we waited for, they said. You carry his spirit, his command, his throne. Kale shook his head violently. No, I'm not him. I never wanted this. But the sword burned hotter, and he felt its will pressing against his own. It did not ask for permission. It demanded destiny. As days passed, the fleet spread across the system, reclaiming stations and bases that had been forgotten. Everywhere they went, machines awoke and fell in line. Worlds that had been silent for ages now glowed with fire and power. And wherever the fleet appeared, the people bowed. To them, the return of the fleet meant only one thing. The Emperor had come back to lead them. But not everyone bowed. In dark corners, assassins were prepared. Councils whispered of plans to kill the human before the fleet could unite under him. Rival warlords forged alliances, vowing to destroy Kale before he could sit upon the throne. The galaxy was dividing, not slowly, but violently. Kale walked among the awakened ships, his reflection glowing in their black steel. He felt the weight of millions of lives pressing against him. He did not want to lead, but he also knew he could not escape. The sword whispered again, louder this time. You are chosen, it said, and the galaxy will burn or kneel because of you. The forgotten empire was no longer forgotten. Its armies had returned, its fleet had risen, and its throne waited. And at the center of it all stood Kale, a human who had never asked for power. But power had chosen him. The forgotten fleet spread across the stars, bringing fear and wonder wherever its shadow reached. Worlds that had been silent for centuries now lit with fire as ancient engines roared again. People bowed when they saw the glowing blade in Kale's hand, whispering the word Emperor. But while the galaxy trembled in awe, a darker game was being played in secret. Among Kale's closest companions was an alien named Saran. She had guided him through the ruins when others had fled, her sharp eyes and calm words earning his trust. Where others bowed, she stood by his side as an equal. Kale thought of her as a friend, perhaps the only one who understood his fear. But Saran carried a secret, one she had hidden even from herself for too long. Far away, in the chambers of the High Council, her name was whispered. Saran was no simple wanderer. She was a shadow agent, bound to the council that feared the Emperor's return. Long ago, she had sworn to kill whoever lifted the forgotten blade. Her mission was clear: destroy the vessel before the prophecy could be fulfilled. But when she looked at Kale, holding the sword with trembling hands, she saw not a monster, not a tyrant, but a man. And still, the council's order burned in her mind. One night, as the twin moons hung low, Saran stood by the campfire where Kale rested. The sword lay beside him, its runes glowing faintly in the dark. Her hand trembled as she reached for the dagger hidden at her waist. If she killed him now, the galaxy would be spared the return of the Emperor. She whispered to herself, End it. End it before it is too late. But Kale opened his eyes, his voice soft. You cannot sleep either? He asked. Saran froze, her hand tightening on the dagger. Kale looked at her with tired eyes not of a ruler, but of a man who carried a weight too heavy. I did not choose this, he said quietly. The blade chose me, and I wish it had not. Saran's heart twisted, because in that moment she saw the truth. He had never wanted power, never wanted thrones. And yet, destiny chained him. Still, betrayal cannot be hidden forever. The council had eyes everywhere, and soon they sent a message to Saran. The time had come. During the fleet's gathering at an ancient station, when Kale stood before thousands, she was to strike. Her betrayal would end the prophecy, or end her. The day arrived. Kale walked through the great hall of the flagship, the sword glowing in his hand. Crowds of soldiers and civilians bowed, chanting Emperor, their voices shaking the walls. Kale tried to speak, to tell them he was no ruler, but the roar of their belief drowned his words. At his side, Saran moved silently, the dagger hidden beneath her cloak. Her heart beat like a drum, torn between duty and loyalty. As Kale raised the blade, the hall shook with energy. Holograms of ancient generals appeared again, kneeling before him. The people shouted louder, their faith burning like fire. And in that moment, Saran struck. Her dagger flashed as she lunged toward Kale's back. But the sword blazed with light, moving on its own, shielding him with a burst of power. The crowd gasped as Saran was thrown across the hall, her dagger shattering in her hand. Kale turned, his eyes wide with pain, not anger. Saran, why? He whispered. The hall fell silent, all eyes on her. Saran's hands shook as tears filled her eyes. I was sent to kill you, she confessed, her voice breaking. I thought you were a monster. I thought you would bring war, but you are not him. You are not the emperor I feared. Kale's chest tightened, betrayal cutting deeper than any blade. He had trusted her, and yet her mission had always been his death. The crowd roared in fury, soldiers raising their weapons. Traitor, they cried, kill her. But Kale lifted his hand, stopping them. No, he said, his voice heavy. If she wished, I would already be dead. The soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, but their eyes burned with hatred. Saran fell to her knees, broken, torn between the council's command and the truth she now felt. Kale looked at her with sorrow. He knew the galaxy was not just against him. It was against itself. The prophecy was tearing loyalties apart, turning friends into enemies. And deep inside, he understood one painful truth. If betrayal could come from someone so close, then the path ahead would only be darker. The forgotten fleet had returned, but shadows had returned with it. The galaxy was no longer united by fear or faith. It was breaking, and Kale stood at the center, carrying the blade that bound them all. The galaxy burned with whispers, but now those whispers had become war cries. Some swore loyalty to the human who carried the forgotten blade. Others vowed to kill him before the prophecy could reach its end. Fleets moved across the stars, worlds shook, and the balance of power broke apart like glass. Kale stood at the center of it all. He had not asked for thrones or titles, yet soldiers knelt before him, and enemies sharpened blades for his blood. The sword hummed in his hand, its runes blazing brighter with every passing day. Sometimes he wondered if the weapon guided him, or if it was using him to bring back what had been lost. The betrayal of Saran had wounded him deeply. Yet even she now walked at his side, her eyes filled not with lies but with regret. She had chosen to stay, to protect him, though she knew the council still demanded her loyalty. Kale did not forgive easily, but he also knew the galaxy left no room for loneliness. He needed allies, even broken ones. The final test came when the fleets of the galaxy converged upon the throne world. It was a planet of black stone and endless towers, abandoned for centuries. At its heart lay the throne of time, carved from obsidian and glowing faintly with the memory of ages. Legends said whoever sat upon it would not only rule, but also awaken the Emperor's full power. To Kale, It was nothing more than a curse, but to the galaxy it was destiny. Armies filled the skies above the throne world. Some came to protect him, waving banners of forgotten empires reborn. Others came to destroy him, their ships bristling with weapons. The greatest war since the Emperor's fall was about to begin, and all of it for one human holding a blade. Kale walked toward the ancient throne, the ground trembling beneath his steps. Every soldier, every fleet, every world watched in silence. The sword blazed like a star in his grip, casting light across the battlefield. Behind him, his fleet roared, thousands of voices shouting, "Emperor!" Before him, enemy commanders snarled, "Pretender!" The clash began. Starships collided in the sky, beams of light tearing through the void. Armies charged across the plains of stone, weapons clashing like storms. Kale fought at the center, the sword carving through machines and warriors alike. Every strike carried not only his strength, but the weight of destiny itself. Veyrak's allies came, seeking revenge for their fallen warlord. Assassins sent by the council struck from shadows. Yet each time, the sword protected Kale, its light flaring with ancient power. It was as if the galaxy itself had decided the human could not fall. Still, Kale felt the burden grow heavier. Every life lost screamed in his heart. He was no emperor. He was just a man trapped by legend. At last, he stood before the throne of time. The battle raged around him, but the world seemed to hold its breath. The throne glowed softly, waiting, calling. Saran stepped beside him, her voice shaking. "If you sit upon it, the galaxy will kneel, but you may lose yourself forever." Kale looked at her, then at the blade, then at the throne. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "I never wanted power, but I cannot run anymore." He stepped forward, the sword blazing so bright that even the stars seemed to dim. With steady hands, he placed himself upon the throne of time. The ground shook, the skies split, and a wave of energy spread across the galaxy. Every ship, every soldier, every world felt it. An emperor had risen again. But this time, it was not the same emperor of old. It was a human who carried both fear and compassion, weakness and strength. Kale sat upon the throne, the sword resting across his knees. The holograms of ancient generals bowed, and the living soldiers followed. He was no longer just Kale. He was something greater, something new. The Emperor reborn, not of the past, but of tomorrow. And as the galaxy knelt, Kale whispered one final truth. "I will not be the Emperor you fear. I will be the Emperor you need." The throne of time pulsed with light. The war stilled, the galaxy held its breath, and a new age began.